I used to think I loved her. Not the kind of love that stumbles into your life through loud laughter or midnight texts. It was quieter than that. Slower. Like a fire that starts from a single match. One glance that made me feel, for the first time, like I was seen. She didn't speak much, but when she smiled, I felt better about who I was. When she went silent, I wanted to speak more, to fill the space between us, and I mistook that space for connection. The truth is, I didn't love her. I loved how I felt when I was with her. I wasn't listening to her words. I was listening to my own echoes inside her gaze. It was like looking into a mirror made of glass and grace, one that only reflected back the parts of myself I longed to believe were real, that I was enough, that I mattered, that someone finally saw me. I called it love. But now I understand. I wasn't chasing a woman. I was chasing a feeling. And she understood that before I did. She didn't have to change me. She only had to reflect me, the exact version I needed to see. And I gave myself away for just one more glimpse of that reflection. But if what we truly love is how someone makes us feel about ourselves, is that love at all? Or just performance? Two actors, each playing a role, hoping the other never reads the script. We fell into a rhythm, she and I. But it wasn't love. It was choreography. She never demanded. She suggested. Never told me what to do. Just waited for me to want to do it. And I did. Every single time. Because when someone makes you feel like you matter more in their presence, you'll give them anything just to stay seen. But I didn't realize I was reading a script. Every moment felt spontaneous. Until I noticed the patterns. She'd smile when I opened up, then go quiet when I stood tall in my boundaries. She'd praise my vulnerability, but never my strength. She didn't want to fight me. She wanted to shape me. Gently, strategically. There were no loud arguments, no slamming doors, just calibration. One day, I shared something deeply personal, a fear I had carried for years. She listened so attentively, so softly, that I mistook it for intimacy. But weeks later, in a moment of tension, she quoted my fear back to me, not to comfort me, but to control me. That's when I knew. She hadn't forgotten a word I'd said, not because she cared, but because she was collecting pieces, studying me, learning what made me small, what made me fold, what made me feel like a boy again. And I kept offering more. You see, she never needed to raise her voice. She didn't need to dominate. She just needed to be indispensable. I found myself asking her what to wear, what to say, what to feel. I thought I was involving her, but I was being rewritten. Each decision I made began with the question, will she like this? Each silence between us became a test I didn't know I was failing. She smiled when I played the part. She withdrew when I improvised, and like a well-trained actor, I adjusted. I stopped laughing too loud, stopped disagreeing. I said yes when I meant maybe. I apologized before I understood what I did wrong, all to keep the illusion alive, all to keep being loved, or whatever version of love this was. But looking back, I wonder, was I ever a man in her eyes? Or just a character, designed to fit the story she needed to tell? The worst part wasn't that she changed me. The worst part is that I changed myself. Just to be enough. It didn't hit me all at once. Truth rarely does. It came in moments, small ones, quiet ones, like when I cracked a joke at a dinner party, and her fingers squeezed my thigh under the table, not playfully, but as a silent correction, like when I said no to a plan she made without asking, and she simply replied, "It's okay, I'll go alone," with a smile that wasn't a smile at all. Like when I told her I was tired and she asked, "Tired? Or just avoiding me again?" I thought love was supposed to feel like understanding. This felt like surveillance. I began to notice how every time I pulled away, even slightly, she'd draw me back in, not with affection, but with absence. She wouldn't argue. She'd just disappear. No goodnight texts. No, how are you? No warmth. And I, like a fool, came crawling back, thinking I had done something wrong. But I hadn't hurt her. I had threatened her hold. And her silence wasn't pain. It was leverage. I was being trained. Each emotional withdrawal was a lesson. Obey or lose connection. Each guilt-laced conversation was a rehearsal. Speak in ways that keep her smiling, or speak and lose her smile. What terrified me most wasn't that she had a strategy. It was that I was responding to it. I began to censor my truth just to avoid friction. I stopped asking questions that mattered. I folded my desires into neat little corners so they wouldn't take up space. I laughed on cue. I nodded in rhythm, and then came the night that broke me. We were lying in bed. She curled into me, placed her head on my chest, and whispered, "You're everything I ever wanted. Now just don't mess it up." It was meant to sound sweet, but to me, it felt like a warning. That's when it clicked. She didn't love me. She loved who I became around her. She didn't nurture me. She monitored me. She didn't see me. She saw the version of me she could use, and I had handed her that version, willingly. I gave her the blueprint to manage me. I gave her my fears, my guilt, my hunger for approval. She didn't steal my power. I offered it like a gift because I confused obedience with intimacy, because I mistook emotional dependency for love, because I didn't know the difference between being understood and being handled. And in that moment, lying next to someone who claimed to love me, I had never felt more alone. I wasn't in a relationship. I was in a performance, and I was exhausted from the role. Before her, I had opinions, edges, a voice that didn't shake when I spoke my truth. But slowly, too slowly to notice at first, I became quieter around her, more agreeable, more easy to love. I told myself it was maturity, that I was compromising. But it wasn't compromise. It was erosion. Every time I adjusted myself to avoid conflict, every time I said yes when I wanted to say no, every time I laughed at something that made me uncomfortable, I carved away a piece of myself and handed it to her, and she took those pieces, not with cruelty, but with expectation. She didn't have to demand anything. I volunteered it, because the more she smiled when I folded, the more I folded. That's how the mask formed. At first, it was just around her, but soon it followed me to work, into conversations with friends, even into the mirror. I no longer recognized the man staring back at me. He was polite, predictable, pleasant, but he wasn't me. He was what I thought she wanted, what I thought the world wanted, what I hoped would finally make me enough. I used to think love was supposed to soften your rough parts. But this wasn't softening. This was sanding down until there was nothing left to soften. I lost my ability to say no, my need to be honest, my hunger to be seen, not praised, not validated, but seen. And the truth is, she didn't even ask me to change. She just reacted, subtle shifts in tone, withdrawn affection when I didn't agree, sudden warmth when I gave her what she wanted. It was like being trained without commands, just consequence, just conditioning, until one day I realized I had become the man she wanted. But in doing so, I stopped being the man I was, and worse, I stopped being the man I could have been, all because I thought love was about keeping her, no matter what it cost me. But what is love if it demands your silence? What is love if it thrives on your self-abandonment? I wore the mask to be loved. But the moment she said, "I love you," it wasn't me she was loving. It was the character I had become, and I hated that character. because he smiled through resentment. He nodded through heartbreak. He stayed when every part of him wanted to run. I lost my voice, my edge, my fight, not because she took it, but because I gave it up to be chosen. And now I was chosen. I was loved, but I was gone. It happened in silence. There was no fight, no grand betrayal, no dramatic revelation, just an ordinary morning. She was sipping coffee across the table, scrolling through her phone. I was watching her, but not with longing, not with affection, but with distance. For the first time in years, I wasn't blinded by the glow I had projected onto her. She looked up, smiled that same sweet smile that used to undo me, but it didn't reach me. Something inside had shifted. A crack in the mirror I had been staring into for so long. And through that crack, I saw the man I used to be. I remembered the boy who once dreamed loudly, laughed without asking for permission, and spoke with a voice that hadn't yet been trained into a whisper. Where had he gone? The answer was simple. I buried him under her validation, under my need to be accepted, under the illusion that to be loved, I had to disappear. And in that quiet moment, I realized something dangerous. She didn't love me, not truly. She loved the man I had sculpted for her, the one who folded instead of questioned, smiled instead of challenged, chased instead of led. And I let her. Worse, I trained her. I taught her that my silence meant love, that my surrender was affection, that my compliance was connection. And now I couldn't blame her, because I had performed this role so well. Even I had forgotten it was an act, but now the act was over. I didn't rage. I didn't accuse. I just stopped playing, stopped over-explaining, stopped trying to impress, stopped offering pieces of myself like bargaining chips. At first, she didn't notice. Then she got confused. Then, upset. Not because I had done something wrong, but because I had changed the rhythm. The man who used to orbit her suddenly found gravity in himself. She couldn't predict me, couldn't guide me with her silence anymore, because I had found mine, and I was listening to the voice I had buried, to the edges I had dulled, to the truth that didn't require her approval to be real. And in that truth, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace that comes from her touch. Not the peace of being enough for someone, but the peace of finally being whole without her. The more I reclaimed myself, the more she pulled back. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just watched, like someone watching a puppet drop its strings. And I saw the fear in her eyes, not of losing me, but of losing control over who I had been. That's when I knew. This wasn't love. This was dependency dressed in desire, This was choreography, pretending to be closeness. And I had been dancing to music that wasn't mine for far too long. It ended the way illusions always end. Not with a crash, but with a quiet click. One evening, she asked me, "What happened to you?" I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I finally did. I woke up. She looked at me, confused, almost hurt, like I had betrayed something sacred between us. But I hadn't betrayed anything. I had only stopped betraying myself. I told her the truth. Not the kind that wins arguments, but the kind that burns delusions. "I don't know if you ever really loved me," I said, "or if I ever really let you." She blinked. "I think I loved the version of you I needed. The nurturing one, the soft one, the one who made me feel like a man, even when I had no spine left." Her silence was louder than any scream. "And you loved the man who chased you, who bent for you, who mistook approval for connection." The mask slipped. Just slightly. For a moment, I saw her. Not the version I had adored. Not the performance she had perfected, but the woman behind it. Scared. Uncertain. Not cruel. Just calculated. The way anyone must be when survival becomes strategy. And I didn't hate her for it. In that moment, I pitied us both. Two people who had never truly met. Two souls that only touched through mirrors, never skin to skin. Truth to truth. She tried to salvage it. "You're being dramatic," she said. "You're just going through something." But I wasn't. That was the point. For the first time, I was not going through something. I was standing in it, present, unfolding. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just gathered my things, not because I hated her, but because I finally loved myself enough not to stay. She asked one last question, her voice trembling, just enough to feel real. Was it all fake? I turned to her, the woman I once would have broken myself to keep, and I said, "No." But it was never whole. Then I walked out. No fireworks, no regrets. Just release. The moment the door closed behind me, so did a chapter of my life I had clung to, like a life raft. But that raft had holes. And I had been drowning for years without realizing it. Now I was in open water, alone, exposed, but breathing deeply, freely, honestly. I didn't go looking for another her. I didn't replace her. Because this time, I wasn't filling a void. I was learning to live with it. I sat with the silence, with the parts of me I had hidden for years, the shame, the rage, the fragility, the hunger to be seen. And in that silence, I met someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Myself. He was quieter than I remembered, but he was still there, waiting. Not for love, not for approval, just for me. This was not a breakup. This was a breaking open of illusions, of dependency, of the man I had pretended to be. It hurt. God, it hurt. But beneath the pain, there was something else growing. Not hope, not yet, but honesty. And that, I realized, was the first real love I'd ever known. In the weeks that followed, there were no grand revelations, no cinematic rise from the ashes, just small, quiet moments, painful, necessary, human. I relearned how to walk alone, not as a broken man, but as a man who no longer feared being unseen. I began making choices that weren't designed to be noticed. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head, stopped scanning faces for approval, stopped offering parts of myself just to feel worthy. And something strange happened. I became still, not numb, not cold, but anchored. There was no one to perform for anymore, no role to keep me safe, no pedestal to maintain, just me, bare, flawed, uncertain, but finally real. I remembered what it felt like to speak without hesitation, to laugh without checking if it landed, to feel without narrating it in someone else's language. One morning, I passed a mirror and didn't look away. For the first time, I didn't search for a version of myself I thought someone might love. I just looked, and I saw a man, not a reflection, not a placeholder, not a savior in need of being saved. Just a man, full, present, enough. That was the gift she gave me. Unintentionally, maybe, but a gift nonetheless. She didn't destroy me. She revealed me. By holding up a mirror long enough for me to finally notice I'd been performing my own erasure, she played her part. I played mine, but the curtain had fallen. And now, off stage, I was free. I no longer crave to be chosen, because I've chosen me, not in a loud, defiant way, but in a steady, silent vow to never again abandon myself in pursuit of someone else's gaze. And if love comes again, real love, it will not be a performance. It will not be strategy dressed as softness. It will not ask me to kneel. It will meet me standing, eyes open, soul unmasked. And if it doesn't come, that's okay too, because I am not waiting anymore. I am living fully, finally, and on my own terms. The end, but really the beginning.